The void between the branches of Yggdrasil is a tapestry of light and life, a symphony of cosmic energy that has been my playground and my battlefield for more centuries than mortal minds can comprehend. I am Thor Odinson, god of thunder, and the song of the storm is the rhythm of my heart. The battle against the Stardrake of Vanaheim was a crescendo in that eternal song. Its scales, forged in the heart of a dying star, shimmered with stolen light, and its roar could crack a world's foundation. For 3 days and nights we clashed amidst the crystalline libraries, the very air sizzling with the discharge of my lightning and the beast's elemental fire. The final blow was a thing of beauty. I soared above the creature, Mjolnir spinning above my head, gathering not just the storm, but the very gratitude of the Vanir people, their hope, a tangible force I channeled through the Uru metal. With a bellow that shook the heavens, I brought the hammer down upon its skull. The impact was not a crack, but a silent, expanding sphere of light that consumed sound itself before erupting outwards in a wave of pure, celestial force. It was this force that was my undoing. Instead of dissipating into the grateful cosmos, the energy recoiled, meeting some unseen festering wound in the fabric of reality I had not perceived. The universe did not bend, it screamed. This was not the clean, purposeful tear of the Bifrost. This was a rupture, a gangrenous wound in the flesh of existence, weeping colors that had no name, and pulsed with a rhythm that promised only madness. It was a maw, and it swallowed me whole. There was no time, no space. There was only the sensation of being flayed, not of skin, but of soul. I was a scrap of parchment in a hurricane of screaming phantoms in impossible geometries that clawed at my divine essence. I clung to Mjolnir, the one constant in the chaos, its familiar hum, a desperate prayer against the cacophony. I was vomited forth into a new reality with the violence of a cannon shot. The first sensation was the air, or the lack of it. It was thick, cloying, a physical weight of industrial ash, ozone, and a coppery, stale tang that spoke of blood spilled on an unimaginable scale. It was the scent of a slaughterhouse that encompassed a galaxy. I floated in the void, my body aching with a new, profound fatigue. Before me hung a world, a sickly, bruised sphere, swathed in a funeral shroud of smogged and orbital debris. Its orbital plates were not the elegant spires of Asgard or the bustling ports of Midgard. They were monstrous, Gothic structures of iron and rock, covered with gargoyles and guns, their design speaking not of beauty or function, but of sheer brutal defiance. They were fortresses in a war without end, and their very shape was a scream of hatred into the uncaring stars. This was no realm I knew. This was a tomb, and the galaxy itself was the corpse. A deep, primal dread, a feeling I had not felt since my youth facing the world serpent, began to coil in my gut. This was wrong. Everything was wrong. The scavengers came quickly, drawn like carrion flies to a fresh kill. Their vessels were ramshackle monstrosities, seemingly held together by rust, faith, and violent paint jobs of red and yellow. They looked less like ships and more like floating scrap heaps that had achieved sentience through sheer aggression. Their engines belched filthy smoke, and the void around them echoed with a cacophony of guttural shouts, a language that was pure, undiluted violence. One of the larger vessels, a hulk with a grotesque, metal-faced figurehead leering from its prow, turned its broadside towards me. With a series of deafening booms that traveled through the sparse medium, it unleashed a volley of shells, each one the size of a Midgardian land speeder. They were crude, unguided, and packed with enough explosives to level a city. A laugh, hollow and without joy, escaped my lips. "You dare fire upon a son of Odin?" I roared, my voice a peal of thunder that I felt ripple through the metal of their ships. I would teach these fools the meaning of power. I summoned the storm, feeling the familiar energy course through me, a welcome warmth in this cold, dead space. I called upon Mjolnir, and a spear of pure celestial lightning, the kind that could carve canyons into a world's crust, leapt from the hammer. It crossed the void and struck the lead vessel square on its grinning metal jaw, and it fizzled. Not a fizzle of weakness, but of corruption. My lightning, the very essence of ordered, divine power, splashed against the ship's hull and was tainted, turning a sickly, fleshy pink before being absorbed by the leering face, which seemed to grin wider. A wave of palpable disbelief washed over me. My lightning? Denied? How was such a thing possible? Before I could process this heresy, a new voice cut through this psychic static, a sound like grinding glaciers and breaking planets. It was cold, devoid of any emotion save imperative. It spoke not to my ears, but directly into my mind, a psychic battering ram of pure will. Unregistered psychic anomaly, potential Xenos incursion or warp heresy. Identify yourself or be purged. I turned, my grip tightening on Mjolnir, and I beheld the angels of this new, terrible heaven. They were giants. Were the Asgardians or a race of gods, these were machines of war given flesh. They stood a full head taller than even our mightiest warriors, encased in armor of ceramite and plasteel, the color of cold, dried blood. Their faces were grim masks of resolve, their helmets fashioned into the skulls of fallen heroes. Their armor was a cathedral of war, etched with symbols of skulls and a two-headed eagle, a motif that spoke of a dominion stretched to breaking point. They moved with a precision that was both beautiful and terrifying, a synchronized dance of destruction. From their massive, blocky guns, bolts of incandescent death roared, each shot a miniature rocket that tore the ramshackle orc ships apart with contemptuous, systematic ease. This was not the wild, joyous chaos of my battles. This was a clinical, industrial extermination. One of them, his armor more ornate, a great relic weapon cradled in his arms like a holy icon, turned his helmeted gaze towards me. I felt his will, a fortress of unyielding faith and absolute hatred, press against my mind. It was not an attempted communication, but a demand for submission. "You are not of the greenskin. Your presence is a paradox. You will be brought to the chapter master for judgment." I hefted Mjolnir, the storm within me rising in response to this challenge. "I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, and I am brought before no one," I thundered, my voice echoing in the void. "I grant audience." The giant did not flinch. The psychic pressure intensified, a wall of pure dogma. "In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. Your titles are meaningless here, anomaly. You will comply, or you will be eradicated as a threat to the Imperium of man." The 41st millennium. The words were a hammer blow to my soul. I had not simply traveled across space, but through an ocean of time, to a future where the very concept of a god had been twisted into something monstrous.
The storm within me grew, not of joyous power, but of a cold, gripping dread I had never known. What had become of Midgard? Of Earth? What horrors had festered here over 30,000 years? The battle between the giants, the Adeptus Astartes as I would learn, and the scavenging orcs raged around me, a symphony of destruction. And I, Thor Odinson, god of thunder, was caught in the middle, a relic of a brighter past, a spark of lightning, stranded in the deepest, most impenetrable darkness.
My passage to the Blood Sword's fortress monastery was a silent, tense affair. I was not bound in chains, but the honor guard of 10 battle brothers that flanked me, their weapons held at the ready, made it clear I was a prisoner. Their vessel, a strike cruiser named Eternal Penance, was a city of war. The corridors were vast, echoing chambers of bare metal and stone, smelling of sacred oils, physaline, and the faint, ever-present ozone of active power armor. It was a place devoid of comfort, a tool designed for a single purpose, the application of absolute force. We walked through halls where serfs and servitors, men and machines fused into a single pitiable entity, scurried about their duties, never meeting the gaze of the space marines. Hymns of battle and death, chanted in low Gothic, echoed from unseen voxcasters, a constant reminder of the creed that bound these warriors. It was a faith built not on hope, but on hatred and endurance. We arrived at a vast chamber, a cathedral to war. Stained glass windows, instead of depicting scenes of beauty or peace, showed heroic, stylized deaths, space marines battling grotesque aliens and demonic entities. At the far end, upon a throne of black iron and obsidian that seemed to drink the light from the room, sat Chapter Master Valerius. He was a monument of a man, even for these giants. His face was a road map of scars, one eye replaced by a piercing red lens that whirred softly as it focused on me. His presence was a physical weight, a gravity of command and unyielding resolve. "You claim to be a god." His voice was a gravelly boom, devoid of any warmth or curiosity. It was a statement of fact, and the fact was an offense. "The Imperium of man has room for only one god, the god Emperor, who sits upon the golden throne of Terra. All other so-called deities are lies, the snares of the arch-enemy, or the pathetic beliefs of Xenos scum." I met his gaze, refusing to be cowed. "I make no claim that requires your belief, warrior king," I replied, my voice echoing in the vast space. "I am what I am. I am from a time before your Imperium, a time of legends your people have long forgotten." "Legends are for children and heretics," Valerius countered, his single organic eye narrowing. "My chief librarian has scanned you. Your psychic signature is anomalous, powerful, yet structured, unaligned. This is a paradox. The warp does not grant such gifts without a price. It always claims its due." "The warp?" I asked, the term unfamiliar and foul on my tongue, like the taste of spoiled meat. The chapter master's lip curled in a sneer. "The Immaterium, the realm of chaos, the source of all corruption, the wellspring of madness. It is from there the arch-enemy, the ruinous powers, draw their strength.
If you are not of it, then you are a weapon or a tool, and tools must be tested to see if they are fit for purpose. He rose from his throne, his artificer armor whirring with a sound like grinding bones. A Xenos fleet, the Tau, encroaches on a strategic forge world, Griffoni Fourth. They seek to claim its industries for their pathetic philosophy, the greater good. You will accompany Sergeant Gideon's squad. You will demonstrate this power you claim. You will fight for the Imperium. In doing so, you may yet prove you are not a heretic to be purged. It was not a request. It was a test, an ultimatum written in blood and gunpowder. I felt a familiar hot anger stir in my chest. To be commanded like a common sellsword, to have my worth measured in the blood of strangers. But the prince in me, the strategist who had led the armies of Asgard, saw the cold sense in his words. I was adrift in an ocean of hostility. I needed allies. I needed knowledge. And this Tau, they were a new variable, a piece on a game board I did not understand.
The drop-pod assault was a violent, jarring experience that mocked the graceful travel of the Bifrost. It was a controlled fall through hellfire and flak, a metal coffin fired at a world. We were slammed into the red earth of Griffon 4 like a meteor of wrath, the impact jarring even my bones. The hatches blew open, and we emerged into a vision of industrial damnation. The world was a vast, planet-spanning factory. The sky was a perpetual smog-filled twilight, lit by the constant fires of forges and the flashes of energy weapons. The air was hot and tasted of metal and promethium. In the distance, colossal manufactorums belched black smoke into the bruised sky. The Tau were orderly. Their battle suits were elegant, floating constructs of advanced alloy and sleek design, a stark contrast to the brutal, blocky forms of the Imperium. They moved with a fluid, almost artistic precision, firing beams of incandescent energy that sliced through armor with terrifying efficiency. It was a different kind of war, a clash of philosophies as much as armies. They fought with cold calculation, not the fiery hatred of the blood swords. "Target the crisis suits for the Emperor and Sanguinius," Sergeant Gideon roared, his bolt gun barking its staccato hymn of death. The Space Marines moved with disciplined fire and maneuver, a wall of ceramite and faith. I watched as a blue and white Tau battlesuit, its pilot encased within, expertly dodged a missile from a bloodsword and returned fire with a burst of plasma, vaporizing the tactical marine where he stood. There was no malice in its movements, only cold, calculated efficiency. It was removing an obstacle, not slaying a hated foe. Then I saw their commander. In a larger, more ornate suit, marked with strange symbols of rank, it leveled a massive, long-barreled weapon, a railgun, at Gideon. I saw the energy build within it, a pinpoint of light that promised absolute physics-rending annihilation. The air itself seemed to hum in anticipation. "Sergeant, incoming!" one of the Marines yelled, his voice tight. I did not think. I acted on instinct, the instinct of a protector. I threw Mjolnir. It was not the playful, looping throw of my youth, but a straight, vengeful lance of divine power. It crossed the battlefield in an instant, a thunderclap of displaced air announcing its passage. It struck the railgun arm of the Tau commander, just as the weapon fired. The resulting explosion was deafening.
The railgun, its firing sequence catastrophically disrupted, detonated. The Tau commander's arm was sheared clean off, his elegant suit sent spinning and crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Mjolnir, its task complete, hurmed unerringly back to my hand, humming with righteous satisfaction.
Gideon looked at me, his helmeted gaze unreadable. He gave a curt, single nod. Effective. It was the highest praise I would likely ever receive from him. But as we pressed the attack, driving the disoriented Tau back, a new horror emerged from the shadows of a ruined manufactorum. These were not sleek warriors or disciplined soldiers. These things shambled forth, beings of rust and decay. They were machines, yet they lived, blighted with a pestilent organic foulness. Metallic limbs dripped with pus, corroded armor sprouted weeping boils, and their weapons fired streams of corrosive filth that ate through rock and metal alike. The stench that preceded them was a physical wave of nausea, the smell of an open grave left to fester for millennia. Plague drones of Nurgle, Gideon snarled, his voice filled with a hatred deeper and more visceral than any he had shown the Tau. The Death God, the scum of the universe, seek to claim this world for their vile god. Purge them all in the Emperor's name. The Tau, caught between the relentless blood swords and this new, putrid and utterly inexplicable threat, faltered. Their clean, efficient warfare was useless against an enemy that reveled in its own decay, that felt no pain, that continued to advance even as they were blown apart, laughing with wet, gurgling glee. A giant, bloated figure, a Death God space marine in Terminator armor, stepped into the fray. He was a walking corpse, his armor fused to his bubbling, diseased flesh. A massive scythe, crusted with rust and filth, was held in his hands. He pointed the rusted blade directly at me, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "A new soul," he gurgled, his voice like a swamp bubbling with gas. "Shiny and bright, full of life and fury. Grandfather Nurgle will enjoy adding you to his garden. Your lightning will not cleanse this rot, little god. It is a rot that loves you. It is a rot that is eternal." The three-way battle erupted into absolute, nightmarish carnage. The ordered lines of the Tau collapsed into chaos. The disciplined advance of the bloodswords became a desperate brawl for survival, and the Death God spread their joyous corruption with every step. And I, Thor Odinson, stood at its center, my hammer crackling with a storm that felt suddenly terribly small and fragile in the face of such infinite cosmic despair.
The stench hit me first, a physical wall of putrescence that clawed at the back of my throat. It was the smell of 1,000,000,000 opened graves, of gangrenous flesh left to bake in a diseased sun, of cankers blooming and bursting in slow motion. This was not the clean, fiery scent of ozone after a storm, nor the metallic tang of blood spilled in honest battle. This was corruption given aroma, and it sought to claim more than just my senses. It sought to claim my very spirit. The Death God champion, Brother Vorlak, was not a warrior in any sense I had ever known. He was a monument to entropy, a sermon of decay preached in fused ceramite and pulsating rotten flesh. He moved with a dreadful, inevitable momentum, like a glacier of pus grinding its way forward. The blessed bolter rounds of the blood swords sank into his bloated form with wet, sickening plops, the explosions muffled by layers of corpulent, diseased tissue.
They did not harm him. They were merely absorbed, welcomed as another facet of his eternal putrefaction. "Your light is an affront to Grandfather's bountiful gifts," he bellowed, his voice a chorus of maggots squirming in a corpse's lung. He swung his massive plague scythe, Manfred's ruin, in a wide, deceptively swift arc. The corrupted metal hummed with a malevolent energy that sought to still the very blood in my veins, to whisper promises of peaceful surrender to the welcoming rot. I ducked under the blow, the scythe whistling inches above my head, the air itself curdling in its wake. Anger, hot and clean, surged within me. This was an abomination, a perversion of life itself. I answered with Mjolnir. I put all my strength, all my divine might into a blow aimed squarely at his distended, rusted chestplate. The impact was not the clear, ringing tone of shattered armor I was accustomed to. It was a dull, wet thump, like striking a mountain of putrid offal. Ceramite and rotten flesh exploded outwards in a shower of filth, revealing pulsating, unnatural organs beneath. Vorlak only laughed, a sound like a man drowning in his own fluids. He spoke, and tendrils of rust and filth, slick with a life of their own, snaked from the gaping wound I had created. They crawled up Mjolnir's haft, their touch a greasy, psychic cold that seeped into the ancient Uru metal. For the first time in a millennium, a cold, sharp fear pierced my heart. This was not a power that could be broken by force alone. It was a concept given form, the concept of despair, of surrender, of the end of all struggle. It was a poison for the soul, and I felt its insidious touch trying to still the storm within me. To my left, the blood swords fought with a grim, desperate fury that was a stark contrast to the Death Guard's joyous resignation. They were not just fighting an enemy, they were fighting an idea, and the sheer metaphysical weight of it was crushing. "Hold the line! Do not let them touch you! Fire and flame!" Gideon roared, his voice cracking with strain. He bisected a slithering, cackling nurgling with his chainsword, the tiny daemon exploding in a puff of foul smoke. They used flamers and plasma guns, the cleansing fire their only effective tool against the relentless advance. The smell of promethium and seared flesh mixed horribly with the ambient stench of disease.
To my right, the Tau were being systematically dismantled, their philosophy of progress rendered meaningless. Their advanced pulse weaponry seared holes in the plague marines, but the traitors simply shrugged off injuries that would felled a lesser being. Their battle suits, marvels of technology, seized with rust, their joints fouled with unnatural grime. I saw a crisis suit pilot desperately trying to eject as his armor locked up, his cockpit canopy cracking open not to freedom, but to a cloud of buzzing, diseased flies that swarmed inside, their buzzing merging with his final, choked screams. Their orderly battle lines, their greater good, collapsed into a panicked, disbelieving rout in the face of this theological nightmare. I had to change my tactics. I could not simply smash this rot. I had to purify it. I had to remind this blighted ground what it meant to be clean. I tore Mjolnir free from the clinging filth, a burst of lightning scouring the immediate corruption from its surface. I soared into the air, the smog-filled pestilential sky churning around me. I closed my eye, not to block out the horror, but to focus.
I called upon the storm not as a blunt instrument of destruction, but as a scalpel of creation. I reached past the corruption, into the memory of the air itself. I remembered the first breath of a newborn, the wind that scours a mountain peak, the gale that clears a sky of pollution. I focused not on the lightning, but on the wind, the pure, cleansing, scouring air that tore at the cloying miasma. I summoned a gale. It started as a whisper, then grew into a roar, a whirlwind of pure oxygen-rich force that tore at the cloying miasma. I directed the heart of this whirlwind directly at Vorlak. He staggered, not from the physical force, but from the purity of it. The cloying, pestilential atmosphere that was his element thinned around him. The rust tendrils that had begun to regrow from his wound withered and flaked away. The flies buzzing around his head were scattered, their droning chorus silenced. A trick, a fleeting breath before the final stillness, he gurgled. But for the first time I heard a note of something other than joyous acceptance. It was annoyance. It was the frustration of a preacher whose sermon is being interrupted. "It is the first breath after a long sickness," I thundered, my voice resonating with the power of the rising storm. "It is the wind that scatters the plague cloud. It is the memory of life that your decay can never truly erase." Now I combined it with the lightning, but not the great sky-shattering bolts I used against armies. I wove thousands of tiny, arcing filaments of power, a vast, intricate net of incandescent energy that settled over Vorlak and the immediate area. This was not about brute force. It was about cauterization, about searing away the corruption on a microscopic, spiritual level. Each filament sought out the unnatural, the diseased, the chaotic, and burned it away with the precise, unforgiving energy of a star's birth. Vorlak screamed, a genuine, raw sound of pain that was utterly different from his previous wet gurgles. His gifts were being systematically burned away. The bloated flesh shrank and blackened. The rust flaked off in sheets. The pus-filled boils dried and cracked. For a moment, I saw the space marine he might once have been before the fall, a giant of humanity, now a desiccated, horrified corpse trapped within his own armor. I landed before him, the whirlwind still howling around us, isolating our duel from the greater battle. Mjolnir now glowed with a clean, white-hot light, its purpose refined and absolute. "You speak of your grandfather's love," I growled, the storm giving my voice a resonance that shook the very earth. "I bring you a father's wrath. I bring the storm that refuses to be stilled." The blow that followed did not just break his body, it broke the spiritual sickness that sustained him. I did not swing for his head or his heart. I swung Mjolnir directly into the hollow, scorched cavity of his chest. This time the lightning did not fizzle or corrupt. It poured into him, a torrent of purifying, ordered energy that had no room for the joyful stagnation of Nurgle. It was the antithesis of his very being.
Vorlak did not explode into gore. He erupted into a cloud of fine, gray ash and a fading, frustrated screech that was not his own, but that of a god denied its prize. The massive, bloated form collapsed in on itself, leaving only a stain on the earth and the lingering, but now dissipating, scent of rot. The effect on the battlefield was instantaneous. The other Death Guard, their connection to their champion and the focus of his power severed, seemed to diminish. They were still monstrous, still deadly, but they were no longer unstoppable vessels of a cosmic plague. They became merely soldiers. Diseased, resilient, horrifying soldiers, but no longer the embodiment of despair itself. The combined, if uncoordinated, fire of the remaining blood swords and the shattered Tau remnants began to push them back, the cleansing fire of the flamers now actually burning the traitors to a true death. In the aftermath, the silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of flames and the moans of the dying. The ground was a morass of mud, blood, promethium, and molten metal. Sergeant Gideon approached me, removing his helmet. His face was stern, etched with the deep fatigue of endless war, his skin pale and clung tightly to his skull. But his eyes, those hard, flinty eyes, held a new, grudging respect. He looked at the pile of ash that was Vorlok, then back at me. You fought the arch-enemy in its most insidious form. You wield a power that is not of the warp, that can harm them on a level our most blessed weapons sometimes fail to reach. The chapter master will be intrigued. He looked over at the retreating, broken Tau forces. The Xenos are broken. The Forge world is secure. The Death Guard's foothold here is broken. For now. He gestured with his chin towards a mangled but still vaguely functional Tau battlesuit, the one belonging to the commander I had disarmed. Their technology is an abomination of reason, a heresy against the machine god. But their knowledge of this sector, of the movements of other Xenos and the arch-enemy, is extensive. The Tech Marines will extract what they can. Their souls are beyond saving, but their data slates may yet serve the Emperor's will. As the blood swords began their methodical, grim work of searching for salvage and recovering the precious gene seed from their fallen brothers, I stood alone amidst the devastation. I had won. I had proven my worth to my grim new allies in the most visceral way possible. I had faced one of the 4 great cancers of this universe and emerged victorious. But the victory felt hollow, tainted. It was not the joyous triumph of a battle well fought, followed by mead and song in the halls of Asgard. It was the grim satisfaction of a surgeon who has cut out a malignancy, knowing the patient is still riddled with disease. I had faced a power that sought not to conquer, but to corrupt, to reduce all of existence, joy, sorrow, struggle, love, to a static, weeping, contented sore. And this, I was told, was but one of 4 such cosmic cancers. The 41st millennium was not just a time of war. It was a universe dying from a sickness of the soul. The physical battles were merely symptoms. And I, Thor Odinson, was now infected with the knowledge of it. The storm within me still raged, but it was a colder, darker storm now, one that had looked into the face of absolute despair and understood for the first time what it truly meant to have something to lose.
The return to the Blood Sword's battle barge, Eternal Penance, was a somber affair.
The vessel was a city of war, a leviathan of plasteel and adamantium, whose every corridor echoed with the grinding of machinery, the low hum of the Gellerfield, a constant reminder of the horrors held at bay, and the distant, monotonous chants of chapter serfs. The air was a sterile mix of ozone, sacred incense, and the faint, metallic scent of blood that no amount of cleansing could ever fully erase. My quarters were a Spartan metal cell, but the lock remained disengaged. I had earned a sliver of trust, a precarious currency in this unforgiving realm. It was in the Apothecarian, a place of stark white light and the grim business of salvaging the unsalvageable, that I learned the true depth of the bloodsword's sacrifice. I watched as the chapter's apothecaries, their movements precise and devoid of emotion, worked on the broken forms of their battle brothers. These were not mere soldiers, they were post-human works of art, their bodies a complex tapestry of additional organs, reinforced bone, and hyper-dense muscle, all dedicated to the single purpose of war. To see them laid low, their sacred biology defiled by plague, their ceramite shells pierced by plasma, their gene seed, the very future of their chapter threatened, was a sobering sight. It spoke of a war so eternal and consuming that even these demigods were merely fuel for the furnace. The Tau commander, Chasnel Viola, was a prisoner in a different, more profound way. His broken XV-8 crisis battlesuit had been placed in a stasis field within the tech labs, a cage of frozen time. I requested, and after much debate among the chapter's leadership, was granted an audience. The tech marines clearly disliked the presence of the Xenos technology, muttering prayers of warding and making the sign of the Aquila over their tools. Viola was out of his suit, and the difference was startling. He was small, slender, a blue-skinned humanoid with a calm, intelligent face, though it was now lined with pain and the deep frustration of capture. A bulky, cybernetic servitor stood between us, its single red eye glowing, its monotone, emotionless voice converting his flowing Tau language into the harsh, guttural sounds of Low Gothic. "You are the one," he began, his large black eyes studying me with an analytical curiosity that held none of the open hostility or religious fervor of the Space Marines. "You disrupted my firing solution. Your intervention saved the life of the Astartes sergeant, but it also prevented a swift and decisive victory over the Imperial forces. The calculus of that engagement was altered." His words were not an accusation, but a statement of fact. It was disarming. "I prevented a death," I corrected him, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous lab. "In such a place as this, there is no such thing as a swift victory. There are only varying degrees of survival." He tilted his head, a gesture of genuine curiosity. "A strange philosophy for a warrior of your apparent physical power. The Imperium does not value individual life. They're a dead end, evolutionarily speaking." I felt a familiar bristle at the insult to the warriors I had just fought alongside, but I held my tongue. Gideon and his men were many things, but they were not ignorant. Their knowledge was simply focused into a single blinding point of faith. "And your greater good?" I asked, steering the conversation. "What does it value?" "Unity," he said, and for the first time a spark of passion entered his voice. "Progress, the logical, peaceful advancement of all sentient species towards a shared, prosperous future. We do not conquer, we assimilate. We offer technology, peace, and a purpose greater than oneself. The Kroot, the Vespid, the Nikasar, they have all joined the Tauvar and found their place." It was a seductive idea. After the unending grimness of the Imperium and the soul-shattering horror of the Death Guard, the Tau's vision was a single, lit candle in an abyss of absolute black. It reminded me with a painful twinge of the ideals my father had once held for the 9 realms, a united, peaceful cosmos under the benevolent, if firm guidance of Asgard. It was a dream I had not realized I still cherished.
The Imperium you fight is a shadow, a twisted reflection of what humanity could be, I said, thinking of the brave, if often foolish, mortals of Midgard I had protected for so long. But the power you faced on the Forge World, the Death Guard, your progress, your logic, your greater good, it means nothing to that. It is the enemy of life itself, of your very concept of a future. Viola's calm demeanor faltered. The memory of the Plague Marines clearly disturbed him on a fundamental level. The Guela daemons, he said, using the Tau word for humans with a slight distaste. Our science has no explanation. Our most powerful energy weapons, our advanced plasma technology, our railguns, they were less effective than the primitive fire-based weaponry of the Imperials. It defies all known physics. It is a strategic and philosophical blind spot the Ethereals are desperately trying to understand. For a moment, we were not prisoner and captor, nor even enemies on opposite sides of a war. We were two beings adrift in the same nightmare, clinging to different pieces of wreckage. He spoke of his sept world, of clean, elegant cities that reached for the stars, of a society that looked to the future with hope, not the grim, regressive dread of the Imperium. He spoke of the Ethereals, wise leaders who guided their people with compassion and reason. It was a hope I desperately wanted to grasp, a lifeline thrown to a drowning god. But it was a fragile, naive hope, and I felt a paternal sorrow knowing it. Later, as I walked the halls of the Eternal Penance, I overheard 2 tech marines discussing their findings from the salvaged battlesuit. Their conversation was laced with binary cant and pious invocations. The Xenos mind science is advanced, a crude form of Neuralink, but the energy signature has a resonant frequency consistent with psychery, one said, his mechadendrites twitching with agitation. Affirmative, the other replied, his voice a synthetic grating. It draws from the immaterium, however blindly, a leaky conduit. It is only a matter of statistical probability before they attract the attention of the neverborn. Their greater good is a beacon in the dark for the predators of the warp. The Tau's beautiful dream was just that, a dream. In the 41st millennium, dreams were not aspirations. They were food for the things that lurked in the dark between thoughts. Their light was bright and pure, but I feared, with a certainty that chilled me, that its very brightness would only make the surrounding infinite darkness hungrier. My brooding was shattered by a ship-wide alarm, a harsh clanging bell that vibrated through the very deck plates. Red lumen strips flashed along the corridors. Gideon's voice, stripped of all superfluous words, barked over the Vox network. All hands to battle stations. Warp rift opening at bearing 224 Mark 9. Massive energy signature. It does not match any known chaos profile. By the throne, it's the Eldari. A new player had entered the game. The ancient, mysterious race the Imperium called the Eldar. They were said to be swift as lightning, deadly as a razor's edge, and as inscrutable as the depths of the warp itself, playing a game whose rules were known only to them. They moved through the stars like ghosts, their motives forever hidden behind masks of arrogance and sorrow. What could they want with a bloodsword's battle barge? Or perhaps a cold thought whispered in my mind. They were not here for the barge at all. Perhaps they were here for the anomaly. For me. The brief respite was over. The glimmer of hope offered by the Tau was extinguished by the cold reality of yet another enigmatic threat. I tightened my grip on Mjolnir, its familiar weight a comfort. The
The storm was calling once more, and I would answer.
The Eldari ship was a thing of terrifying, impossible beauty. Where Imperial vessels were mountainous blocks of armor and defiance, this was a wraith-bone seabird, its hull flowing in graceful, organic curves that seemed to defy the void itself. It moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made the eternal penance seem like a hobbled giant, its holofields making it flicker in and out of reality like a half-remembered dream. It did not open fire with brute broadsides. Instead, it launched a single smaller craft, a slender needle-like ship that pierced the eternal penance's void shields not by overpowering them, but by sliding through their energy frequencies like a ghost through a wall. "They are boarding us!" Gideon's voice was a snarl of pure, undiluted hatred over the Vox. "Harlequins, solitaire sighted, to the main astropathic sanctum. They seek the oracle. They will not defile it." The battle that erupted within the sacred corridors of the battle barge was unlike any I had ever witnessed, a perverse ballet of death that made the brawling chaos of the orcs seem almost honest. The Eldari warriors, the Harlequins, were a blur of impossible motion. They were silent phantoms in motley of dazzling, disorienting colors, their faces frozen in theatrical masks of laughter, sorrow, or rage. They moved in a dance that was both beautiful and horrifying, their movements a fluid, acrobatic art form where every leap, every pirouette ended in a kill. The only sounds they made were the ethereal hum of their power swords, blades of crystallized light that could slice through ceramite as if it were parchment, and the staccato shriek-crack of their shuriken istles, which filled the air with a storm of monomolecular-edged discs. The blood swords, for all their power and unyielding discipline, were like giants trying to swat hummingbirds. Their bolter shells, capable of shredding a platoon of lesser foes, exploded against walls and ceilings, always a fraction of a second behind their elusive targets. The Harlequins used the very architecture of the ship against them, leaping from Gothic archways, sliding under sweeping chainsword blows, and turning the Space Marines' methodical advance into a chaotic melee. It was a clash of philosophies made manifest, the Imperium's relentless, grinding advance versus the Eldari's elusive, deadly precision. I waded into the fray, Mjolnir feeling like a sledgehammer in a duel of rapiers. My strength was overwhelming force, and these dancers relied on evasion and misdirection. I quickly learned that aiming for a specific foe was futile. Instead, I swung the hammer in great, thunderous, area-denying arcs. I smashed the deck plates, sending shock waves of force and lightning through the metal, disrupting their perfect, deadly rhythm. One such shock wave sent a trio of Harlequins tumbling from a high gantry, their graceful forms sent sprawling into a squad of bloodswords who showed them no quarter. One of them, a figure whose mask was a rictus of frozen, knowing laughter, landed lightly before me. He wielded a crystalline sword that shimmered with captured starlight, its edge humming with a psychic frequency that set my teeth on edge. He moved with an authority the others lacked, a master performer amidst the chorus. The new piece on the board, the thundering anachronism, a god from a simpler time, lost in the intricate web of fate. Segarash finds you deeply amusing. "Who are you?" I demanded, Mjolnir crackling in my hand, its lightning reflecting in the polished surfaces of his mask. "A player in the great play, a jester in the court of a dying galaxy, a singer of the final song." He danced around a burst of boat fire from a nearby marine, his movements a mockery of physics. "You seek a way home, do you not, little godling? You feel the wrongness of this time in your very bones." My blood ran cold. How could he know the deepest yearning of my soul? "My path is my own concern," I growled.
"Is it?" he chimed, lunging forward. His speed was breathtaking, a blur of color and light. His blade met Mjolnir in a shower of psychic sparks and shrieking energy. It was not a contest of strength, but of skill and speed. For every thunderous blow I threw, he had 3 elegant, deadly responses. He was not trying to kill me. He was testing me, probing my defenses, reading the rhythm of my soul. The path you seek is not through the crude void of real space, but through the webway, the labyrinth of the old ones, the true backbone of the galaxy. And we, the blessed servants of the laughing god, are its masters.
He flipped over a sweeping hammer blow, his blade scoring a shallow, sizzling cut on my pauldron. The pain was sharp, clean, unlike the corrosive touch of Nurgle. You fight the symptoms, the crude orcs, the rigid Imperium, the festering plague god, he taunted, his voice a whisper in my ear as he vanished and reappeared behind me. But you do not see the disease. The great enemy, she who thirsts, was born of their decadence. He gestured vaguely, a sweeping motion that seemed to encompass the entire tragic history of his own race. The fall birthed the cancer. We merely navigate the dying body. We can offer you a path, he continued, his tone shifting from mockery to something colder, more serious. A gate that can take you to any point in space and time, a way back to your golden age. But all things in this galaxy have a price, little god. A service must be rendered. A debt must be paid to the laughing god. What service? I growled, parrying a flurry of blows so fast they were almost a single sustained attack. But before he could answer, a new presence erupted into the corridor. It was not a sound, but a psychic scream of such pure, undiluted, joyous aggression that it froze even the Harlequins for a split second. It was a wave of green, bestial consciousness that washed over us, a sensation of pure, unthinking violence. From a secondary access way that had been torn open as if by a colossal can opener, a hulking, green-skinned monster erupted, its massive shooter blazing, bellowing a single, deafening, galaxy-shaking word. Wah! Orcs. They had teleported aboard in the confusion, a tidal wave of pure, green violence. The perfect, deadly dance of the Eldari was instantly and utterly shattered. The Harlequins' elegant strokes, meant for vital points, now found themselves chopping at thick, muscle-bound limbs that barely seemed to notice. Their acrobatic flips were met with hails of crude, high-caliber gunfire that cared nothing for grace or precision. The Harlequin facing me let out a sound of genuine theatrical frustration. The primates, the uninvited guests, they always ruin the punchline. The corridor descended into a 3-way melee of unbelievable, chaotic bedlam. The Harlequins, their dance broken, now fought with a furious, lethal efficiency against the green tide. The blood swords, momentarily forgotten, regrouped and began pouring fire into both Xeno's forces with grim satisfaction. And the orcs, in their element, just smashed everything in sight with a joyous, mindless abandon, their laughter echoing as loud as their gunfire. In the midst of this insanity, the lead Harlequin, a flicker of motion amidst the green horde, tossed a small glowing crystal that landed at my feet. It pulsed with a soft inner light, and I felt a strange geometric pull from it. A token, a map to a gate. Find us on the crone world of Shah Dam if you survive the green tide and the monkey's wrath. The laughing god awaits your decision, thundering anachronism. Do not keep him waiting long. With that, he and his remaining troop vanished, melting back into the shadows and flickering hollow fields from whence they came, leaving the blood swords and I to face the rampaging orc horde. The promise of a way home, a shimmering prize I had scarcely dared to hope for, now dangled before me, tangible and real. A path away from this eternal war, back to the light of Asgard. But the price? A service for a trickster god on a demon world? I knew, with the certainty of a god who has dealt with Loki, that the cost would be greater than it seemed. It was a bargain written in riddles, and I feared the fine print was written in blood. I launched myself over the seething mass of green bodies, a golden god amidst a sea of savagery. I landed before Gitsnaka with a crash that dented the deck plates. The orcs around us, sensing a proper boss fight, formed a crude circle, cheering and bashing each other in their excitement. "Your reign of mindless violence ends now, creature," I roared, channeling the storm into Mjolnir until it glowed like a miniature sun. I brought it down in a blow that could have leveled a Midgardian fortress. He met my hammer with his power claw. The collision was titanic, a concussive shockwave that threw nearby orcs off their feet and cleared a wide circle around us. Sparks of celestial lightning and bestial psychic energy flew. He was impossibly, brutishly strong, his raw physical might amplified 100-fold by the belief of thousands of his boys, who were now chanting his name. "Gitsnaka! Gitsnaka!" The Wa energy was a palpable force, a green pulsating haze that pressed against me, trying to overwhelm my own divine aura. It was a battle of wills as much as strength. The collective consciousness of the orc horde was trying to convince reality itself that their war boss was the stronger one, that my lightning was just a flash, that my hammer was just a shiny gubbin. "You's a zoggin' good fight, you are," Gitsnaka bellowed, spitting another tooth out from the impact. He tried to crush me with his claw, the hydraulics screaming, but I held him fast, our weapons locked, muscles straining. I could feel it, the greasy, green, psychic field trying to suppress my power, to convince my own soul that I was the lesser being. But I am the god of thunder. My will is the storm itself. I am the unyielding mountain that breaks the wave. I am the lightning that shatters the night. I pushed back, not just with muscle, but with the full weight of my divinity. I poured my essence into Mjolnir, the ancient Uru metal singing with the primordial power of a star's core. The clean, white-hot light of Asgardian creation began to push back against the feral green energy of the war. The chanting of the orcs faltered as they saw their war boss's claw begin to be forced back, inch by straining inch. "What?" Gitsnaka grunted, his piggy eyes widening in confusion and dawning rage. This wasn't in the script. The shiny Git was supposed to get crumped. "This is not mindless force," I growled, my voice resonating with the power of the storm gathering above us, the very ship's lights flickering as I drew power. "This is order. This is purpose. This is the wrath of a god who defends, not the rage of a beast who only destroys." With a final shattering roar that drowned out the din of battle, I unleashed the full, focused might of the storm. It was not a wide-area blast, but a concentrated beam of lightning, hotter than a sun's core, that erupted from Mjolnir's face. It shot straight through the power claw, vaporizing the crude mechanics and into Gitsnaka's chest. For a moment, there was a deafening silence.
The war boss looked down at the smoldering, fist-sized hole that went straight through his body. He could see the cheering boys behind him through the cleanly bored tunnel in his torso. He looked back at me, not with pain or fear, but with a sort of stunned, grudging respect. He had gotten the proper fight he wanted. "That was a proper fight," he gurgled, before his massive, unstoppable form crashed to the deck like a felled tree, dead. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the orcs. The war field, so dependent on the war boss's dominant will, flickered like a dying light and then vanished. The orcs, moments before a cohesive, unstoppable horde driven by a single psychic purpose, suddenly became just a mob of disorganized, squabbling brutes. Their unbreakable morale shattered into 1,000 pieces. The fight went out of them, replaced with confusion and the sudden overriding urge to loot and find a new boss. The Bloodswords, sensing the seismic shift, let out a united vox-amplified battle cry and surged forward. The dam held, and now it broke. A tide of crimson ceramite and chainswords cutting down the leaderless, demoralized greenskins with renewed vengeful vigor. The battle was won. The ship was once again secured. I stood panting over the corpse of the war boss, the stench of ozone, orc blood, and void-scorched metal thick in the air. I had won. I had proven my strength against one of the galaxy's most pervasive and physically daunting threats. But as the adrenaline faded, my fingers found the Harlequin's crystal in my belt, its geometric pulse a cold, constant reminder. The Eldari offered a path, but through the webway, a place they said was a labyrinth, and in all the realms, in all the stories, labyrinths never hold treasure at the center without a monster to guard it. The greatest monster of all, perhaps. The path home was now a tangible possibility, but the cost of taking it loomed larger than any war boss.
The orcs were a force of nature, a raw, roaring tide of muscle, metal, and unshakable reality-bending belief. Their philosophy was brutally simple, carved into their genetic code. If it ain't fightin', it ain't worth doin'. And right now, the inside of a mighty Imperial warship was the best, most odd fight they'd had all week. Their very presence was a psychic cacophony, a war field that thickened the air, made metal rust faster, and turned their ramshackle technology into functioning instruments of destruction through sheer collective will. Their leader was a war boss named Gitsnacker, a monster the size of a dreadnought, clad in scrap metal he called armor. One of his arms ended in a massive hydraulic power claw that could shred adamantium, and in the other he held a shooter that was less a gun and more a portable, multi-barreled artillery piece. He bellowed orders that were less tactics and more general enthusiastic directions for maximum violence. "The spiky gits are gone. Now it's just us and the hoomies and their big can. Let's crump 'em good and take their teeth." The Bloodswords, to their credit, did not break. They formed a shield wall in the wide corridor, a bulwark of ceramite and unyielding faith against the green onslaught. Bolt guns roared, their mass-reactive shells punching through the smaller boys, exploding them from the inside in showers of gore and teeth. But for every orc that fell, 2 more clambered over the twitching bodies, their eyes burning with the simple, uncomplicated joy of combat.
They were a flood, and the Space Marines were a dam slowly being eroded. I became the anvil to their hammer. I waded into the thickest part of the horde. Mjolnir was a whirlwind of divine destruction. This, at least, was a language I understood on a primal level. This was a brawl, not a metaphysical struggle against cosmic despair or a duel with elusive phantoms. Every swing of my hammer was a thunderclap that sent a dozen orcs flying, their bodies pulped and broken against the walls. Lightning arced from the hammer, leaping from one green body to the next, cooking them inside their crude metal plates. The smell of ozone, scorched flesh, and orc sweat filled the air. But the orcs were uniquely, maddeningly resistant to my power in a way the others were not. Their collective psychic field, the Wa, was so potent it warped reality around them in a subtle, localized way. A bolt of lightning that should have vaporized a squad might only stun them, leaving them smoking and dazed but still bellowing for a fight. Because in their simple, brutal minds, a big flashy light wasn't necessarily lethal. It was just part of the Zoggen good show. I had to put more conscious will, more raw power into every strike to achieve the desired effect. It was exhausting. I saw a blood-sword Marine, his helmet torn off, get his entire arm sheared off by Git Snacker's power claw. Without a single cry of pain, the Marine detonated the crack grenades on his belt, blowing himself and a handful of boys to pieces in a final, defiant act of martyrdom. The explosion staggered the war boss, blackening his armor, but didn't kill him. He just shook his head, spat out a tooth, and laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "That tickled! Now let's see if yous tickle me proper!" This was the true, insidious horror of the orcs. They enjoyed it. The war, the death, the destruction, it was their purpose, their religion, their reason for being. You couldn't break their morale because they had none to break. The concept was alien to them. To an orc, dying in a good fight was a life well lived. I knew then that we had to cut the head off the snake. The war field was a psychic extension of the war boss. While he lived, the horde would remain a cohesive, unstoppable force. I had to break him, not just physically, but psychically.
The Chapter Master's stratagem was a sphere of cold, hard light and data. Holographic displays flickered with the silent, grim ballet of fleet movements across a sector of space known as the Cathor sector. Valerius stood at its center, a grim statue of ceramite and resolve amidst the ghostly projections of 1,000 war zones. The air hummed with low-level psychic static from the astropathic relays and the constant grinding logic of the ship's cogitators. "The Xenos filth has been purged from the eternal penance," he stated, his voice a low rumble that brooked no celebration. His single red lens eye was fixed on me, unblinking. "Your actions against the greenskin horde were effective. The chapter is in your debt." It was the closest I would ever come to receiving gratitude from this man. It was a statement of account, not of thanks. "The debt is settled if you grant me leave. I have a path to follow." I told him then of the Harlequin's offer, of the shimmering crystal that pulsed with a map to the webway, of the crone world of Shah Dom. I spoke of a gate that could traverse not just space, but time itself. I omitted the parts about the service they would demand. To speak of bargaining with Xenos tricksters would be to paint a target on my own back. As I spoke, the air in the vast chamber grew colder, the holographic stars seeming to dim. "The Aldere,"
He spat the word as if it were poison on his tongue. Liars and tricksters, every one of them. Their webway is a den of witches, and worse, a blasphemy against the natural order. And Shah Dam, he let out a short, harsh bark that was devoid of any humor. It is a world lost to the eye of the terror, a festering jewel in the crown of the archenemy. To go there is suicide. To treat with them is heresy of the highest order. I am not of your Imperium, I reminded him, my tone firm, the thunder a low growl in my chest. Your laws of heresy do not bind me. This is my only chance to return to my own time, to my people. Your people are dust, he roared, his composure finally shattering like glass. The holograms flickered violently with his outburst. Your time is dead and forgotten. There is only the now, the eternal war for the soul of humanity. You have a power, Odinson, a power that can smite the foes of the god Emperor. To abandon that duty, to flee into the arms of Xenos witches for a selfish quest, is a sin against the entire species. His words were a physical blow, each one landing with the weight of a world. Was he right? Was my desire to return to a lost golden age, to the warmth of Asgard's halls and the camaraderie of the Warriors Three, a betrayal of the trillions suffering in this dark, unending now? The weight of the 41st millennium pressed down on me, a suffocating mantle of duty I had never sought, never wanted. I was a king, not a soldier. Yet here was there a difference. It is not my war, I said, but the words felt hollow even to my own ears. They were the words of a child, not a god. It is everyone's war, he countered, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that was somehow more terrifying than his roar. He took a step forward, his massive form blocking out the light to the dying star on the hololith.
He turned abruptly, his armor whirring. With a sharp gesture, he manipulated the controls. The starfield vanished, replaced by a horrific swirling wound in the fabric of space itself, a vast, bleeding tear of purple, pink, and malevolent black. It was a scar on the galaxy, so immense it defied comprehension. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, it has split the galaxy in twain. The light of the Astronomicon flickers, and in the darkness, the forces of the dark gods run rampant. Worlds are dying, screaming into the void by the thousands every hour. And you speak of leaving? He input another command. The hololith zoomed in with dizzying speed on a sector near the trailing edge of the rift. A system glowed, surrounded by a swarm of angry red icons. A Black Legion war fleet, the personal armada of the despoiler himself, Abaddon the Armless, lay siege to the cardinal world of Cathur. It is a bastion of faith. If it falls, a dozen surrounding systems will be bathed in chaos, their populations sacrificed to dark gods or worse. We are mustering every ship, every warrior, every round of ammunition. This is the battle that will define the fate of this sector for the next century. You will stand with us. It was not a request. It was not an invitation. It was a conscription, delivered with the finality of a headsman's axe. The blood swords, for all their newfound grudging respect, saw me not as an ally, but as a resource, a weapon of immense power to be pointed at the most dire threat. I was a thunderbolt to be thrown, and Valerius was the hand that would guide me. The Harlequin's crystal felt like a shard of ice against my hip, its subtle pulse a siren's call to hope, to home, to everything I had lost. But Valerius's words and the grim, terrifying reality of the holographic carnage painted a different path, a path of duty, of sacrifice, of inimitable soul-grinding ruin. It was a path that led not to golden halls, but to a charnel house. I was trapped, truly and utterly trapped.
To seek the path home was to turn my back on a galaxy screaming in agony, to become the selfish god the chapter master accused me of being. To stay and fight was to be consumed by a war that had no end, a war that would grind down even a god into dust, leaving nothing but a hollowed-out weapon for a corpse emperor. In that moment, standing in that sphere of projected light and impending darkness, I felt a kinship with the mortals of this era that I had never expected. This was the choice they faced every single day in 1,000 different ways. A quick death, a slow death, or damnation. There were no good options, no paths that led to sunlight and mead, only varying shades of an eternal, consuming darkness. I looked at the determined, fanatical, and utterly convinced face of Chapter Master Valerius. I thought of the hopeful, doomed face of the Tau commander Viorla. I remembered the mocking, theatrical laughter of the Harlequin. One offered a grim duty, another a fragile hope, and the third a dangerous secret. The path of the warrior, the path of the king was clear. It was a path of sacrifice. "I will fight at Cathur," I said, the words tasting of ashes and promethium. It was the only choice I could live with. The god of thunder would ride to war one more time, not for glory, not for joy, not for treasure, but because it was the right thing to do. The path home, the shimmering promise of the laughing god, would have to wait. First, I would face the despoiler. I would stare into the heart of the great rift itself, and I would let the galaxy hear my thunder one last time.
The void around the cardinal world of Cathur was a firestorm of silent, horrific beauty. Imperial battleships, great cathedrals of war adorned with scripture and statuary, exchanged broadsides with the jagged, daemon-proud vessels of the Black Legion. Lance beams, pure and precise, cut burning scars across the darkness, while the chaotic, warp-infused artillery of the traitors painted the void with unpredictable eruptions of malevolent energy. Boarding torpedoes, filled with heretic Astartes hungry for slaughter, streaked like poisoned darts towards Imperial hulls, their impacts tiny, fatal kisses of metal. Our own descent to the planet's surface was a trial by fire, a violent plummet through an atmosphere thick with ash and the debris of dying ships. The world below was a testament to faith, now become its pyre. Vast cathedrals, whose spires had once scraped the heavens, were now broken, smoldering skeletons against a blood-red sky, torn asunder by the baleful light of the Great Rift. The air itself was a toxic brew, thick with the psychic resonance of hatred, despair, and the zealous fervor of those knowing they were making their last stand. On the ground, the war was a meat grinder on a scale that dwarfed even the eternal conflicts of the 9 realms. The Imperial Guard, the untold billions of common humanity, fought and died in trenches filled with mud, gore, and the churned-up bones of previous waves. They were a sea of desperate faces and lasguns, holding the line against the traitor guardsmen and cultists who had sold their souls for a moment of power, their bodies now twisted into grotesque parodies of the human form. And at the forefront were the traitor Marines, the Black Legion. They were the Bloodsword's dark mirror, their armor black and gold, spited and blasphemed with the symbols of all 4 dark gods. They were faster, stronger, and filled with a malevolent demonic power that made the steadfast resilience of the Death Guard seem sluggish in comparison. They were hate given form, and they reveled in it. I fought beside the few remaining Bloodswords. We were the tip of the spear, the anvil upon which the Black Legion's hammer was meant to fall. We crashed into the heart of their advance, a bulwark of crimson against the tide of black. Mjolnir was a constant thunderous presence. I shattered traitorous rhinos and predators, calling down lightning from the tortured sky to incinerate squads of shrieking cultists, and dueled with Chaos Space Marines, whose chain axes screamed with the trapped essences of daemons. But for every one I felled, 2 more took its place.
This was the true, grinding face of the Long War, an endless hate-filled conflict that had raged for 10,000 years. This was not a battle for territory, but for the very soul of this world, and the Black Legion had dedicated an eternity to perfecting the art of soul-breaking. I saw Sergeant Gideon fall, a Black Legion champion, his armor etched with runes of corn, ducked under Gideon's chainsword and drove a lightning claw deep into his chest, piercing hearts and primary lungs. There was no dramatic last word. With his final guttering breath, Gideon detonated the melt-a-bombs on his belt. The sun-bright blast consumed the champion and a dozen of his heretic brothers, leaving a glassy crater in the ground. Gideon's death was not a tragedy to be sung of in sagas. It was a statistic, a line item in the ledger of an eternal war. He was simply spent. The battle coalesced, as it always must, around a symbol. The grand cathedral of the divine purpose, its immense spires now scarred and broken, its stained glass windows depicting saints and angels blown inward. It was there, amidst the rubble of faith, that I saw him, Abaddon the Despoiler. He was a giant, even among the Astartes, a figure of ancient, terrible history, clad in the hulking Terminator armor of a bygone age. In one hand, he held the Talon of Horus, a monstrous lightning claw that had once belonged to his traitorous father. In the other, he held Dracnian, a demonic sword that was not merely a weapon, but an entity, the echo of the first murder, and it screamed with a psychic frequency that promised an end to all things. His presence was a black hole, a vortex of ambition and hatred that sucked the hope and light from the very world. Chapter Master Valerius, seeing the archfiend himself, led the final charge. It was a clash of titans, a moment of pure epic tragedy. The two chapter masters, one loyal and one fallen, fought with a fury that shook the very foundations of the cathedral. Valerius was a master swordsman, his relic blade a blur of sanctified steel. But Abaddon was a veteran of a 10,000-year war, a master of every form of killing, and empowered by the patronage of all four chaos gods. He was not just a warrior, he was a force of destiny.
Dracnian met Valerius's blade, and the ancient power sword of the blood swords shattered into 1,000 shards. The daemon blade did not stop. It bit deep into Valerius's chest, shearing through ceramite, adamantium, and bone. The chapter master fell, his lifeblood staining the sacred stones of the cathedral, his body lying broken at the foot of the one who had brought ruin to his chapter. Abaddon looked up, his eyes burning with baleful demonic light, and they found me, the anomaly, the godling, the little spark from a dead age. His voice was a psychic avalanche, crushing the will of mortals from miles around. You do not belong here. Your power is a paradox in this era of certainty. I will gift your soul to the gods, and they will pick it apart for their amusement. They are curious about you. He strode towards me, the ground cracking under his weight, the bodies of the fallen crumbling to dust in his wake. The remaining blood swords, what few were left, tried to form a wall, a final desperate defense of their fallen master and this strange ally. Abaddon didn't even break stride. He swept Dracnian in a wide, contemptuous arc, and a wave of pure, demonic energy, the concentrated essence of ending, vaporized them where they stood, their armor and bodies unmade in an instant. I was alone. I hefted Mjolnir, the storm within me rising to meet this ultimate challenge. This was it. Not a fight for a world or a sector, but for the very concept of order against the tide of absolute, universe-consuming chaos. We charged.
The first clash between Mjolnir and the talon of Horus split the sky. The thunder of the impact was a physical wave that leveled the ruins around us. Lightning, pure and golden, met raw, untamed warp fire. I fought with everything I had, every ounce of my divine strength, every trick of combat learned over 2,000 years against frost giants, dark elves, and world-ending serpents. But Abaddon was a force of nature. Draknian parried Mjolnir with a shriek that hurt my soul, its demonic voice whispering promises of an end to all struggle. The talon of Horus tore gouges in my armor, its corrupting touch seeking to weaken my divine essence. He was not just a warrior, he was a conduit for the combined, hateful attention of the ruinous powers. "You fight for a corpse," he bellowed, driving me back with a furious, relentless assault. "You defend a race doomed to extinction. Their time is over. Join the winning side, godling. Embrace the true liberating truth of the galaxy. It is chaos, and chaos is all that was and all that will ever be." His words were a poison, seeping into my mind, seeking to amplify the despair I had felt since my arrival. The hopelessness of the Imperium, the inevitability of the dark gods, it was all a weight, threatening to crush my spirit, to make me lay down Mjolnir and accept the end. But then I thought of Asgard, not as a memory, but as an ideal, of its golden spires gleaming in the sun. I thought of my friends, of laughter and feasts and the clashing of mead horns. I thought of Midgard, of its stubborn, brave, flawed people who always fought to be better. That was what I fought for. Not for the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, but for the memory of light, for the idea that light could exist again.
"No!" I roared, the thunder in my voice a pure, defiant denial of the despair he peddled. "I fight for what was, and for what could be again. I fight for the dawn that always comes after the storm." I summoned a storm the likes of which this blighted, war-torn world had never seen. I drew not just on my own power, but on the last defiant breaths of the dying guardsmen, on the unyielding faith of the fallen bloodswords, on the very memory of hope that this galaxy had forgotten. A vortex of lightning and scouring wind focused entirely on Abaddon, ripping at his armor, trying to tear the demonic influence from him. And with all my might, all my will, I did not hurl Mjolnir at him, but at the source of his power, the demonic sword, Draknian. The hammer, imbued with the pure, ordered, life-affirming power of a god from a brighter age, struck the incarnate blade of the first murder. The explosion was not of light and sound, but of reality itself unraveling. A silent, expanding sphere of nothingness, a temporary hole in the cosmos, erupted from the point of impact. It threw Abaddon back, his ancient armor scorched and smoking, the talon of Horus crackling with feedback. It threw me across the plaza, my body screaming in agony, my vision swimming. I felt ribs crack and my divine blood, ichor of gold, splatter on the stones. Draknian screamed, a sound of pure psychic agony that shattered the minds of every mortal within a kilometer, and flickered, its form destabilized, its connection to the materia momentarily severed. Abaddon rose to his feet. He was wounded, angered, humiliated, but not defeated. He looked at me, a newfound grudging hatred in his eyes, then at the sky, where his fleet was beginning to push back the Imperial Navy. The strategic objective, the world of Cathur, was nearly his. The symbol was broken. The battle was lost. "This world is mine," he growled, his voice still a terrifying instrument of power.
Your defiance changes nothing. It is a footnote. The long war continues. We will meet again, little god. And next time, I will not be so merciful. With a final hate-filled glare that promised eternal vengeance, he activated his teleport homer and vanished in a crackle of displaced air, back to the safety of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. I lay broken amidst the ruins of the cathedral, the black, acidic rain of Thor beginning to fall, mingling with the blood and ash on the stones. I had faced the despoiler and lived. I had wounded him. I had for a moment silenced the first murder itself. But I had not stopped him. Thor had fallen. The forces of chaos had won. In the 41st millennium, there are no victories, only respites. And I was now adrift in the longest, darkest respite of my life.
I was recovered from the battlefield, a broken god amidst the rubble of a broken world. My divine physiology, a marvel of cosmic engineering, worked to knit shattered ribs and seal torn flesh, but the deeper wounds, the wounds to my spirit, remained raw and open. The Imperial forces were in full, desperate retreat from Kandahar, a shattered armada fleeing the system. The blood swords were a ghost of a chapter, their chapter master and the heart of their veteran corps dead. The few surviving battle brothers, their crimson armor now scoured and blackened, looked upon me not with gratitude, but with a hollow, exhausted acceptance. I was a weapon that had been used, a tool that had survived its purpose, its edge now dulled. The Harlequin's crystal was no longer a subtle pulse in my belt. It was a burning brand against my hip, a constant geometric itch in my soul. With the Imperium in disarray and my debt paid in the currency of blood and failure, there was nothing left for me here but an eternity of grinding, hopeless war. It was time. Time to seek the path I had turned from. Time to embrace the dangerous bargain. Using the crystal as a focus, I retreated to the ruins of a shattered chapel, away from the grim stares of the surviving Imperials. I sat amidst the fallen statues of saints, their stone eyes blind to the devastation, and I meditated. I reached out with my senses, beyond the reek of promethium and blood, beyond the psychic scream of the fallen world. The crystal responded, its inner light brightening, and in my mind's eye I saw it, a path, not a straight line, but a shimmering, impossible lattice of light weaving through the seething, chaotic madness of the warp. It was a tunnel of ancient, stable energy, a secret road through the storm, the webway. I left without a word. I took a small, abandoned shuttle, its cockpit still smeared with the blood of its previous pilot, and guided by the crystal's insistent pull, flew it towards a seemingly empty region of space on the edge of the Kandahar system. There, hidden by psychic veils and technology so advanced it seemed like magic, was the Webway Gate. It was an arch of wraithbone, alive and breathing with a soft inner light, its surface covered in runes that pulsed with a rhythm older than the Imperium itself. It was beautiful, and its beauty was terrifying. As I approached, a figure stepped from the shadows cast by no sun. It was the same Harlequin from the ship, the one with the laughing mask. He seemed to simply coalesce from the void, as if he had been waiting there for an eternity. The thundering anachronism returns, the piece that refused to be swept from the board, and he has chosen the path of secrets, or is it the path of last resorts? I have chosen a path, I said, my voice weary, the echoes of Drachnian screams still haunting my mind. What is the service you require? Name your price. His laughter died instantly. The theatricality vanished, replaced by a chilling absolute seriousness
that was far more frightening than his jests. The price is this. Deep within the webway, on the croneworld of Shah-Dam, a relic is kept. Not a weapon of war, but a vessel of memory. An Eldari soul stone of immense antiquity, containing the spirit of an ancient Farseer who saw the fall approach and could not stop it. It is a treasure of my people. It is held captive, not in a vault, but in the palace of a servant of Slanesh, the dark prince of pleasure and pain, a keeper of secrets named Xerathax. You will go to Shah-Dam. You will enter its palace of mirrors and screams. You will slay the demon and retrieve the soul stone. A mission, an assassination in the heart of the enemy's domain. It was a grim, straightforward task, a clear, if monstrous, target. Why me? I asked, my suspicion a cold stone in my gut. Why not your own kind? Your warriors are swift and deadly. Because Xerathax is no mere beast of claws and rage. It is a connoisseur. It feeds on emotion, on sensation, on the exquisite peaks of passion and the devastating depths of despair. The complex, refined passions of my kind are a 7-course banquet. Your nature, your power, it is of storms, of a simpler, more direct, more elemental wrath. It is a flavor the demon cannot easily digest. It is a vintage too crude for its palate.
The reasoning was sound, in a twisted, alien way. It reminded me of using a blunt instrument to smash a delicate, venomous spider. I agreed. What choice did I have? I will do it. The journey through the webway was a disorienting, soul-stretching nightmare. It was a labyrinth of shifting light and singing crystal, where physics were a suggestion, and the walls themselves seemed to whisper the secrets of dead empires. I saw ghostly echoes of the Eldari in their prime, a race of such breathtaking beauty and power, it made Asgard seem provincial. I saw their terrible, decadent fall, the birth screams of a chaos god from their collective excess. I saw battles fought millennia ago, frozen in moments of timeless violence. It was a place outside of time, and my own temporal displacement was a screaming wrongness within it. I was an anachronism walking through a gallery of tragedies. Shah-Dam, when I emerged, was a world of breathtaking, terrible beauty. Its ruins were elegant and graceful, all sweeping arches and delicate spirals, but they were twisted now into obscene, sensual shapes. Spires curved like languid bodies, archways formed agonized mouths, and the very ground seemed to pulse with a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. The air was thick with a psychic perfume that promised ultimate ecstasy and delivered only soul-rending agony. I could feel the presence of the daemon, a bloated, narcissistic consciousness that sat at the world's heart like a spider in a web of its own vanity, feeling every vibration of emotion on its planet. Xerathax's palace was not made of stone, but of solidified illusion and captured sensation. It was a shifting maze of mirrored halls, each reflection a warped, tempting, or horrifying version of myself. I saw myself enthroned in Asgard, a beloved king, but the reflection showed my subjects' eyes glazed with adoration, their wills broken. I saw myself as a destroyer, Mjolnir cracking planets, a liberating simple purpose. I saw myself kneeling before the golden throne, my lightning sanctified by the Emperor's will, a purpose found in this dark era. The daemon was trying to break my will,
to make me lose myself in a labyrinth of possibilities, to give in to one extreme or the other. But my will is the storm. I am the eye of the hurricane. I focused on my purpose, on my home, on the simple, unwavering goal. I shattered the mirrors with thunder, each crash a denial of the daemon's illusions, a declaration of my own reality. I am Thor Odinson. I roared, my voice a peal of certainty in the hall of lies, and I am here for what is mine. I found it in the central chamber, a space that was simultaneously vast and intimate. Zirathix was a monstrously beautiful creature, its form androgynous and alluring, with 4 arms, each holding a blade of liquid shadow that trailed colors behind them. Its voice was a symphony, each word a note that plucked at the strings of the soul. A new plaything, it purred, the sound vibrating through my very bones. A god of thunder! How vigorous! How primal! Let us see what symphony we can make you scream. Let us compose a new opus with your pain, your pride, your righteousness. The battle was not physical, but spiritual. Its every movement was designed to evoke sensation. A blade would sweep past, not to cut, but to let me feel the exquisite chill of impending death. It would dance around me, its form shifting, presenting images of Asgard restored, of Sif and the Warriors 3 calling me home, all to evoke a longing so sharp it was a physical pain. It weaponized my own emotions, my own memories, turning them against me. But I am the son of Odin and Gaia. My emotions are the elements. I do not succumb to them, I command them. I let the storm rage within me, a pure, undiluted force of nature that had no room for the daemon's perverse artistry. My lightning was not hateful, it was cleansing. My thunder was not angry, it was declarative. When it tried to evoke pride, I gave it the humble pride of a protector. When it tried to evoke rage, I gave it the cold, focused rage of a king delivering justice. "You are boring," Zirathix shrieked, its form faltering, its beautiful features twisting in frustration as my elemental, straightforward nature disrupted its very essence. My power was an anathema to its complexity, a single crude note in an endless symphony, a hammer in a world of scalpels. I am a corruption, I stated, my voice flat and final, a pronouncement of fact. And I am the purge.
I did not throw Mjolnir at its body. I threw it at the core of its being, the nexus of its psychic form, the place where its vanity and hunger coalesced. The hammer, blazing with the unyielding, ordered power of Yggdrasil itself, a power that predated the dark gods, struck true. The Keeper of Secrets did not explode. It unraveled. Its beautiful form dissolved like a painting in the rain, its colors running, its symphony collapsing into a cacophony of fading, frustrated screams and dissipating perfume. Where it stood, a single, glowing crystal pulsed with a soft, clean, sorrowful light. The Eldari Soulstone. I picked it up. It was warm to the touch, humming with an ancient, tragic intelligence that had witnessed the end of a galaxy. The laughing harlequin appeared beside me, as if from a fold in the air. He took the soulstone from my hand with reverent bow, his theatricality returning. "The bargain is struck, son of Odin," he said, his voice holding a new, genuine note of respect.
The laughing god is pleased. The story takes a most interesting turn." He gestured, and a new webway gate shimmered into existence behind him. "This gate is now yours to command. Its coordinates are yours to set. Think of your home, of your time, and step through. The path you sought is open." I stood before the arch, the power to go home finally in my hands. I was moments away from the Bifrost Bridge, from the golden halls, from my friends, from the light. But I hesitated. The faces of the blood swords, the hope of the Tau, the mocking laughter of the Harlequin, the despair in Abaddon's words, they flashed before my eyes. I had seen the galaxy as it was, a bleeding, dying thing, and I had a power that could make a difference. A real difference. Not as a weapon for the Imperium, but as a force for something else. Something that remembered light.
I stood at the threshold of eternity, the webway gate shimmering before me like a tear in the fabric of a nightmare. Its light was not the warm golden radiance of the Bifrost, but a cold, complex tapestry of shifting colors, a geometric promise that whispered of forgotten physics and alien truths. All I had to do was picture home. The soaring spires of Asgard, the roar of the feasting hall, the steadfast presence of my friends, the simple, honest weight of a mead horn in my hand. I could be there. I could leave this charnel house of a galaxy behind, this eternal, grinding war that sought to strip the very concept of hope from existence. But home was a memory, and I was no longer the god of that memory. The faces of the fallen haunted me, not as ghosts, but as convictions. Sergeant Gideon's final silent detonation. Chapter Master Valerius's broken form at the feet of the despoiler. The hopeful, doomed eyes of the Tau commander Viola. They were not my people, but they had become my responsibility. I had fought beside them. I had seen the flicker of their souls in the overwhelming dark. To turn my back now, to use this hard-won passage for escape, felt not like a victory, but like the ultimate surrender. It would be an admission that the darkness had won, that the universe was, in its final accounting, a place of despair. I am Thor Odinson. I am the god of thunder. And a god does not abandon his realm no matter how blighted it has become. The Harlequin watched me, his head tilted in a pantomime of curiosity, but I could feel the intensity of his focus. This was the final test, the last twist in the laughing god's play. Would the anachronism choose the comforting lie of the past or the terrible truth of the present? I turned from the gate, its siren call fading to a distant hum. I met the Harlequin's masked gaze. I said to the laughing god that the thundering anachronism is staying. This galaxy has enough ghosts haunting its past. What it needs is a storm. A sound escaped the Harlequin. A genuine, unfettered laugh, devoid of mockery and filled with pure theatrical delight. Oh, Segarash will be so amused. The game changes. A new piece forever on the board. The script is rewritten. He performed a flourishing bow, a gesture of respect and farewell. Farewell, Lord of Storms. Make your thunder heard. He vanished. Not in a puff of smoke, but simply by ceasing to exist, his laughter echoing in the crystalline silence of the Webway Junction. I was alone, truly alone for the first time since my arrival. No Imperium to command me, no Xenos to bargain with, no path home to seek. There was only the war, and my place within it, my own place. I reached out with my mind to the Webway Gate, not to picture a memory, but to envision a need. I did not seek a time, but a place where the war was hottest, where the light was most desperately needed, where my particular brand of divine fury could do the most good. The gate responded, its colors swirling, shifting from complex patterns to a vortex of deep biological purples and chitinous blacks. I could smell the stench of alien hunger on the air that wafted through it. I turned my back on the path to Asgard and stepped through the portal into the heart of a new hell. I emerged not into the familiar skies of any world I knew, but into the fire-racked void above a planet being consumed. A hive fleet, the Tyranids. I had only heard whispers of them, an extragalactic swarm of all-consuming bio-horrors, a tide of claws and teeth that stripped worlds to bare rock. And here they were, in numbers that defied comprehension. The void was a living nightmare. Imperial battleships, proud vessels like those I had seen at Cathor, were being overwhelmed, encased in a web of organic tendrils that pulsed with vile energy. Their hulls were being digested, their guns silenced by swarms of winged gargoyles. I saw a mighty Imperial battleship, the Divine Right, its lance batteries firing in desperate, panicked volleys. A massive, serpentine bioship, a kraken, wrapped itself around the vessel's midsection, its colossal claws digging deep into the armored hull, preparing to rip it in two. Boarding pods, like fleshy spores, peppered its surface.
I was a single golden speck against an infinite, hungry dark, a lone peal of thunder in a silent, screaming night. The scale of the horror was beyond anything I had faced. This was not war for faith, or territory, or for power. This was war for existence itself. The Tyranids were the ultimate end, the silence after the last scream. There was no bargaining with them, no reasoning, no glory, only survival or consumption. And in that moment, facing the ultimate negation, my purpose became crystalline clear. I was not fighting for the Imperium. I was not fighting for the Emperor. I was fighting for the idea of a future, for the chance that one day a child might look up at a sky not filled with terror, but with stars of hope. I fought for the memory of light and for the possibility of its return. I am Thor Odinson, and I am not alone anymore. I fight for them all. I soared through the vacuum, lightning crackling around me, leaving a trail of incandescent energy in the void. I did not head for the command ship or the largest bioform. I headed for the point of most immediate, desperate need. I flew straight for the Divine Right. I crashed onto the back of the Kraken, my impact cratering its chitinous hide. It was like landing on a mountain of living bone and sinew. The creature seemed barely to notice, so vast was its consciousness. I raised Mjolnir high, its light a tiny, defiant beacon in the oppressive, soul-crushing gloom. "For Asgard!" I roared, my voice a psychic thunderclap that vibrated through the bioship's hull. "For the Imperium! For every soul that refuses to fade! Hear me and despair!" And I brought the hammer down. It was not a strike against armor or flesh. It was a declaration of war against the void itself. A storm of pure celestial lightning erupted from the point of impact, not merely electrocuting the creature, but unmaking it. The lightning was order, life, and power. The Tyranids were the ultimate expression of chaotic, devouring hunger. They were antithetical forces. The Kraken shuddered, a convulsion that ran through its miles-long body.
The chitin around me blackened and exploded outwards. The creature's grip on the divine right loosened for a vital second. I saw macro cannons on the Imperial ship, now free, swivel and fire point blank into the beast's head, blowing it to pulpy fragments. But it was just one creature in an endless swarm. More came. I became a whirlwind of lightning and divine fury, a one-god army holding the line in the void. I shattered spore clouds with concussive thunderclaps. I vaporized winged creatures with arcs of power. I landed on the backs of bioships and shattered their spines with focused blows from Mjolnir. I was a storm that would not be quelled, a light that would not be extinguished. I fought not for a day or a week, but for what felt like an eternity. There was no rest, no respite, only the endless grinding need to be the shield against the tide. I felt my energy wane, my body ache with a fatigue I had never known, but with every blow I saw a transport ship escape the planet's atmosphere. With every lightning blast, I saw an Imperial lifeboat make it to a waiting frigate. I was not winning the war, but I was saving lives. I was buying time. I was being a god. In a lull in the fighting, I found myself standing on the ravaged hull of the Divine Right, looking out at the receding hive fleet. They were not defeated, merely redirected. The cost had been catastrophic, but the system, for now, was saved. A figure approached me, clad in the powered armor of the Imperial Navy, his uniform singed and his face smeared with grime. He was an admiral, and he looked upon me not with fear or religious awe, but with the exhausted gratitude of a man who has seen a miracle. "Lord," he said, his voice raspy, "I do not know what you are or from whence you came, but you have saved my ship and the lives of 50,000 souls upon it. The Imperium, we are in your debt." "There is no debt," I said, my voice heavy with fatigue, but clear. "The war is eternal. I am merely a soldier in it." He nodded, understanding the grim truth of it. "Then, soldier, what shall we call you?" I looked out at the stars, at the endless dark battlefield of the 41st Millennium. I hefted Mjolnir, its weight a comfort and a promise. "Call me Thunder, and know that while I stand, the night will never be silent."
The war is eternal. The darkness is deep. But in the grim darkness of the far future, a new legend is born. Not of a god who fled, but of a god who stayed. A golden warrior whose hammer brings not just destruction, but a flicker of hope. They speak of him in hushed tones on besieged worlds, a myth within the myth of the Imperium. They say that when the darkness is at its thickest, when the demons pour from the sky and the Xeno swarm overwhelms, you can sometimes hear it, a distant peal of thunder, clean and bright against the cacophony of war. And for a moment, just a moment, the soldiers of the Imperium remember that there are still things in the galaxy worth fighting for. They call him the Stormbringer, the anachronism, the last thunder of a dead age. And his war has only just begun.
Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. It truly helps us continue bringing these massive what-if stories to life.